All right, let's dive right into this. Picture this, it's August 1966, on an isolated, completely fog-shrouded hill in Rio de Janeiro. A young boy is just out flying his kite when he stumbles upon something that would literally baffle police, scientists, and conspiracy theorists for well over half a century. We are looking at what is absolutely one of the most bizarre unsolved mysteries in modern history. Imagine walking up this steep, overgrown trail and finding two men lying side by side. But here's the thing, there are zero signs of violence. No sign of a struggle, no blood, no weapon, nothing. They're just lying there in brand new formal suits, covered by these light waterproof raincoats. But then you look closer, and you notice the detail that turns this from a standard cold case into something entirely different. Over their eyes, they are wearing heavy hand-cut lead masks. Like the exact kind of heavy metal shielding you'd use to protect yourself against severe blinding radiation. And it gets weirder. Sitting right next to them in the grass was this small, unassuming little notebook. But when investigators actually opened it up, the instructions written inside sounded less like a daily to-do list and more like a script from some psychological sci-fi thriller. I'm going to read this verbatim so you can hear just how strange this is. 1630, be at the agreed place. 1830, swallow capsules. After effect, protect metals, wait for mask signal. I mean, think about how incredibly cryptic that is. Protect metals? Wait for a mask signal? No poison was ever confirmed at the scene, no survivor ever came forward, and these haunting little instructions just raise infinitely more questions than they answer. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack this terrifying rabbit hole, examine the evidence step by step, and explore the secret society that might have actually sent these two men to their deaths. Act 1. The technician's final hours. To make any sense of this bizarre scene, we really have to look at who these men were. Meet Manuel and Miguel. They were just two completely ordinary electronics technicians from a town about 170 miles away. On August 17, 1966, they told their families they were just heading out to buy some supplies and electronic equipment for their repair business. Pretty normal, right? But here is the very first major red flag. They left home carrying a surprisingly massive sum of cash. We're talking enough money to buy a small car back in 1966. They take this money, hop on a bus, and head toward the coast. And their timeline leading up to their deaths is incredibly mundane, which just brilliantly highlights how bizarre the ending is. At 14:10, they arrive in Niterói. At 15:15, they stop at a local shop and buy those identical waterproof raincoats. Then, at 16:35, they stop at a local bar to grab a bottle of water. But witnesses at the bar noticed something super strange. Miguel was sweating profusely. He appeared visibly extremely nervous, and he kept checking his watch constantly, over and over, like he was counting down the minutes to a highly anticipated appointment. Shortly after leaving that bar, they walked up Vintem Hill. Now, Vintem Hill wasn't just a casual park. It was a steep, difficult climb that was pretty notorious in the area for illegal activity and weird local rumors. Once they walked up that overgrown path into the overcast weather, they were never seen alive again.
3 days later, police finally reach the summit, and what they find completely shatters conventional investigative logic. This brings us to Act 2. The evidence board.
Let's systematically break down the physical evidence they found at the scene, because it's like a giant puzzle. First, the lead masks. Heavy plates of lead, hammered and cut specifically to fit over their eyes, completely solid, no eye holes. Second, their outfits. They were wearing formal suits, and over those suits, light waterproof raincoats. Though remember, this is Brazil, and despite the overcast sky, it was hot weather, so why dress so heavily? Third, right beside them was an empty water bottle and 2 damp towels. Fourth, the notepad with those step-by-step instructions we talked about. And finally, remember that massive sum of cash they left home with? It was completely gone, just vanished. Yet, as I mentioned earlier, their bodies showed absolutely zero signs of physical trauma or struggle. You've got a missing fortune, but absolutely no fight. Now, I really want you to consider this specific piece of evidence, the lead masks. Why on earth would 2 radio repairmen go through the incredible effort of hand-cutting heavy lead plates just to cover their eyes? Well, what is lead actually famous for? Its primary physical property is blocking radiation and shielding against extreme high-frequency electromagnetic energy. It's exactly what you wear in an X-ray room or what nuclear technicians use. And remember, the instruction in their notebook literally said, after effect protect metals, wait for mask signal. The heavy metals are a chilling clue here. They were clearly anticipating an event so intensely bright or so highly radioactive that human eyes just wouldn't be able to withstand it.
As police dug deeper into their backgrounds, a really disturbing picture started to emerge. Act 3. The the spiritual electronics cult.
Turns out, these guys weren't just fixing radios and TVs. Behind closed doors, they were deeply involved in some hidden, fringe affiliations. They actually belonged to a secret underground movement in Brazil known as the Scientific Spiritualists, or sometimes they were referred to as the Psychophysical Seekers. This part is fascinating. This group held a core belief that the rapidly advancing technology of the 1960s, specifically modern high-voltage electronics, could be combined with intense meditation routines and psychedelic substances to literally bridge the gap between our physical world and higher dimensions, or even make contact with extraterrestrial beings. They were essentially trying to build radios to communicate with the unknown, constantly experimenting with dangerous high-voltage vacuum tubes and frequencies right in their own backyards.
So let's tie this all back to the notebook. Remember that timestamp, 1830 swallow capsules? Well, on the exact night Manuel and Miguel died, multiple residents living in the neighborhood surrounding Vintem Hill called the authorities, and they all reported seeing the exact same terrifying phenomenon, a massive, bright orange, glowing orb just hovering silently right over the peak of the hill. And guess what time these reports were filed? Right around 1830, the exact scheduled time they were instructed to ingest those capsules. The alignment of these local UFO sightings with that specific timestamp is, without a doubt, one of the most eerie aspects of this entire case.
But hey, if you thought this was just a singular, isolated tragedy of two men taking things way too far, consider this. 4 years prior to this event, in 1962, another electronics technician was found dead on a completely different hill in the exact same region. The circumstances? Almost identical. He was found lying down, wearing a formal suit with a hand-cut lead mask over his eyes and absolutely no explanation for his death. Manuel and Miguel's deaths weren't some random fluke. They were following a highly specific, deadly pattern. Over the decades, investigators, journalists, and scientists have endlessly debated this evidence. Today, we can really boil it down to Act 4, 3 theories of death. Let's break them down rapid fire. Theory number 1 is the deadly experiment gone wrong. This is probably the most widely accepted theory by traditional investigators. It suggests that Manuel and Miguel genuinely believed they were going to contact spirits or alien entities that night. To do this, they willingly ingested a highly potent, perhaps completely toxic, hallucinogen, the so-called capsules. Believing that the gateway to the spirit world would emit a blinding, supernatural energy, they built the lead masks to protect their eyes. Ultimately, the capsules were just far too strong, and they tragically died of an accidental overdose while waiting for a signal that never came. Then we have Theory 2, the malicious setup. This explanation is much more grounded and, frankly, much more sinister. The idea here is that someone within their scientific spiritualist circle knew these two men were a bit gullible and, more importantly, had access to a lot of cash. This third party convinced them to bring that huge sum of money to the hill to purchase or witness some exclusive breakthrough technology. Once they got up there, the perpetrator fed them poison disguised as enlightenment capsules, waited for them to die, stripped them of their money, and just walked away into the night. It certainly explains the missing cash perfectly, right? And finally, Theory 3. The unintended radiation leak. This one leans heavily into their identities as technicians. What if they actually were experimenting with incredibly dangerous high-energy frequency equipment or even illicit radioactive materials up on that hill? This completely justifies the physical necessity of those lead masks. In this scenario, something went catastrophically wrong with their homemade device, exposing them to a lethal dose of radiation or high-voltage energy. This would cause sudden and fatal organ failure without leaving a single scratch on their skin. So here is the crucial point, and the fatal flaw that literally haunts investigators to this day. To prove any of these theories, we would absolutely need to know exactly what was in their systems. What were the capsules? But the police investigation was a total disaster. The bodies were left out in the elements way too long, and the toxicology reports from 1966 were severely delayed and completely mishandled by the coroner's office. The samples degraded. Because of this monumental error, we will never officially know what was inside those capsules. The key to the entire mystery was literally washed away. Which leaves us staring at this final, unresolved timestamp. What actually happened at 1830 on Vintem Hill? Were Manuel and Miguel simply the gullible victims of a dangerous pseudo-scientific cult? Were they the targets of a cold-blooded, calculated robbery? Or, in their final moments behind those heavy lead plates, did they actually succeed in contacting something not of this earth? Today, the lead masks remain locked away in a police archive in Rio de Janeiro, silent witnesses to a mystery that time forgot.
It's a massive puzzle with missing pieces, and I want you to think about which theory makes the most sense to you, because until new evidence comes to light, the truth remains buried on that hill.